The holodeck opens on a launch range at nautical twilight, but not a clean one. Salt wind drives low over concrete. A narrow-gauge service train sits beneath a water tower, 6 flat cars loaded with battered telemetry cabinets, cable reels, lamps, and 1 silver pressure vessel marked test article, no flight. 2 kilometers away, beyond dunes furred with beach grass, a squat blockhouse shows 1 amber window. I chose a range because ranges punish ambiguity honestly. We have 20 observers in the gallery behind the blast glass and 4 people on the pad. Nobody gets to be atmosphere. Our system is the range controller on that cabinet. It treats an unanswered readiness query as failure and scrubs the test. We are going to give it 3 silences, nobody there, somebody refusing, and somebody deliberately waiting. Our job is to build the smallest witness test that tells those apart without making the silent party explain.
The service train lurches when I climb onto the first flat car, as though the world has accepted the premise before the implementation. Good. Let the physical thing resist us. The controller currently asks each station ready and starts a 5-second timer. Assigned yes advances. Anything else becomes no response, which is terminal. That makes silence legible only as failure. It protects against one class of accident by erasing 3 different social and operational facts. I brought a spool of fiber, 3 cheap contact plates, and no proposal yet. I want the test to witness conditions around silence, not translate silence into an assertion. Absence should remain absence. Refusal should not have to become an essay. Waiting should not be penalized merely for declining the controller's tempo.
I open the controller cabinet and find exactly the sort of design that produces confident postmortems. 1 input bit, 1 timeout, 1 error code, and 17 pages of comments. The smallest witness test begins by refusing the premise that the same transition occurred 3 times. We need to state what claim the controller is permitted to make. On timeout, it may claim no readiness authorization was received before this deadline. It may not claim that the station was absent, unwilling, unsafe, inattentive, or still evaluating. Those require evidence. Distinguishing the 3 silences will therefore need evidence external to the missing reply. If we solicit explanation from the silent party, we have defeated the room before testing anything.
I roll one of the telemetry cabinets off the flat car onto the concrete. It has casters with 2 working brakes, 1 theatrical brake, and 1 philosophical objection to level ground. Our first useful distinction: the system does not need to know why someone is silent. It needs enough licensed evidence to decide which transitions are allowed next. That is smaller. Absence may permit reassignment after a bounded check. Refusal may prohibit retry pressure and preserve the refused operation as contested or denied. Patient waiting may suspend the deadline without authorizing action. 3 states perhaps, but I distrust state labels that sound wiser than their evidence. Let us make the witnesses primitive enough that we can say who produced each fact and who pays if it lies.
I pull the silver vessel's umbilical loose, carry it to the cabinet, and connect nothing. It is only weight and consequence for now. The test article changes the room because every abstraction has to survive besides stored pressure. Here is the existing protocol. Controller sends ARM quest with operation hash and deadline. Station either returns ARM Auftaufassortion or does not. At deadline, the range scrubs. The engineers hate false scrubs, so they keep lengthening the timer. Operations hates long holds, so somebody adds an override. Eventually, silence becomes a nuisance that seniority can erase. I have watched competence become an argument for continuing. I am not interested in a cleverer override. I want a witness that can stop us for the right reason and wait without being mistaken for broken.
I unroll the fiber along the rails instead of toward the blockhouse. The track gives us 3 stations without pretending they are people. Flat car 1 will be presence, flat car 2 will be boundary, flat car 3 will be time. A silence is classified only from independent receipts across those stations. Presence can testify that a station's capability is currently attached, not that a person is mentally available. Boundary can carry a pre-committed refusal token for this operation class, requiring no response when the request arrives. Time can carry a patient's lease issued before the deadline, a declaration that evaluation is active until a later instant, without promising yes. If none exists, we still have unknown, not absence. We need an actual absence witness. An attachment alone is too brittle.
Correct. Disconnection is not absence. It may be a partition. An expired capability is not absence. It may be administrative delay. If the category is truly absence, the witness must be scoped. No authorized station occupies role R for operation O during interval I can be established by the role registry, provided the registry is authoritative for assignment and its freshness is bounded. That does not claim the person is absent from the world, only that the required role has no current holder. I take a grease pencil and write on the cabinet door, never infer in state. Under it, classify authority periods. The labels can stay human, absence, refusal, patient waiting, but the machine evidence must remain narrower than the label.
And if the registry is stale, the witness says do. Unknown is not a fourth personality. It is a limit on our claim. I wedge the bad caster with a brass coupling and the cabinet settles. Let us stage this physically. We will send the same ARM request 3 times. Nobody at the target console will speak, type, gesture, or justify. Before each run, the surrounding infrastructure will differ by one minimal fact. Run A role assignment retired with a receipt. Run B. An active role holds a refusal capability scoped to this operation hash. Run C. An active role holds a waiting lease scoped to the same hash and a future review boundary. The controller observes only signed artifacts. If it asks the silent station for clarification, the test fails.
That is almost too clean. Real ranges are not clean. Put the role registry in the blockhouse, the refusal token on this flat car, and the patient's lease on the service train's last car. Then cut one link during each run. If our smallest witness requires global agreement before it can distinguish anything, it is a diagram, not a system. Also, the test article will begin a slow nitrogen fill as soon as we start. At low pressure, waiting is cheap. Near the limit, waiting itself changes the safe options. Patient waiting must not be forced to explain itself, but patience cannot mean the plant owes infinite hazard. The witness should preserve silence while the physical system chooses a safe holding state.
Yes, continuing requires positive authority. Stopping can require less. That asymmetry matters here. The controller can enter safe hold on any missing authorization without declaring the silence a failure. Then the witness test distinguishes which recovery path becomes legal. Absence permits the scheduler to seek a new qualified role. Refusal prohibits re-asking the same principle through another interface and prohibits substitution if the authority was personal rather than role-based. Waiting preserves the current holder and forbids reassignment until the lease expires or the plant reaches a separately defined safety boundary. We do not need silence to authorize safe hold. The plant's own safety envelope already does.
We now have 2 independent machines that must not be conflated. The plant controller determines what physical action is safe without authorization. Hold, depressurize, or abort. The witness classifier determines what claims and solicitations are allowed after the missing reply. If we combine them, a safety abort will be recorded as the person refusing, or a refusal will be treated as evidence that the vessel was unsafe. I draw 2 columns, effect state, armed, holding, safing, aborted, authority state, unfilled, dented, deliberating, nunned, off-fortened. A transition in one may constrain the other, but it does not rewrite it.
I dislike deliberating. It claims an inner act. The lease only proves that the role holder reserved evaluation time. They may spend it staring at the sea. Call it wait project. That names the system's obligation, not the person's psychology. Likewise, dented is acceptable only if the refusal token explicitly denies. If the token says do not raytree, then the state is raytree barred, not a universal denial. The smallest witness test is becoming a vocabulary test, which is not trivial. Bad nouns smuggle authority. A system says user inactive, and soon feels entitled to recover the user's work, replace their choice, or escalate around them.
Wait, proteted. Good. I climb onto the locomotive and release the handbrake. The train rolls toward the blockhouse at walking speed, dragging fiber off Austin's spool. Everyone has to work now. Barbara, implement the registry transitions on the cabinet.
Cole, build the witness comparator. Austin, make the link faults. I will operate the vessel and the train.
The audience can see the pressure gauge projected across the clouds, but they cannot affect it. We are testing a controller that used to call every silence failure. We are replacing that with a receipt-backed distinction among an unfilled role, an explicit boundary, and protected time while the hardware independently moves to safety.
The cabinet's keyboard is military in the sense that every key requires intent. I define 5 artifacts, not 3. Assignment names role, holder capability, operation class, validity interval, issuer, and version. Retirement names the assignment it ends. Refusal names the exact request or class, its scope, and whether substitution or retry is barred. Wait lease names request, protected interval, and no implied outcome. Plant limit names the physical deadline after which hold becomes safing. Each artifact has provenance and an abort behavior if validation fails. The classifier receives artifacts but may emit only one of 4 claims. Unvilled, prequest refused, wait proof it, or unresolved.
Why not prioritize them? Suppose an assignment is retired after a refusal was issued. Is this absence or refusal? The history matters because operators will use the current label to decide whether they can recruit someone else. I tie the fiber through a mechanical guillotine mounted beside the rail. Our fault injection will be wonderfully unsubtle. I think refusal survives retirement for the scope it named. Otherwise, administration can erase a boundary by removing the person who set it. The present role may be unfilled, but the request remains refused. We need the comparator to return more than one orthogonal fact rather than squeeze the world into one bucket.
That is the first deletion test. Remove the single category field. Keep a fact set with precedence only at the decision boundary. Facts. Role filled yes, no, or unknown. Request boundary present, absent, or unknown. Wait protection active, expired, absent, or unknown. The 3 silences are scenarios across those axes, not ontological states. The smallest witness is not a classifier at all. It is 3 independent predicates plus a policy table. I pull relays from the cabinet and arrange them on the flat car. Green for role evidence, red for boundary evidence, amber for time evidence. None is allowed to extinguish another.
Pressure is at 12%. I open the fill valve another quarter turn. Now answer the operational objection. If refusal and wait protection are both present, what do we do? Somebody can issue a wait lease and then refuse before it expires. Does the system keep waiting because patience was promised or honor the later refusal immediately? In flight hardware, later evidence is not automatically superior. A delayed packet can arrive later with an earlier causal position. I want version and lineage, not wall clock romance.
The refusal and wait lease must cite the request version and the authority lineage. If the same capability issues both, and the refusal causally succeeds the lease, refusal terminates wait protection for that request. If causal order is unresolved, both facts remain and the allowed action is the intersection. Do not proceed, do not retry, do not reassign through a path barred by the refusal and place the plant in safe hold. No adjudication is needed to remain safe. Adjudication is needed only to expand authority. That is an important property. Ambiguity narrows action without forcing either artifact to narrate itself.
I reach the guillotine station and put my hand on the lever. The controller sends the first request toward the empty console in the blockhouse. We have registered a role assignment, retired it, and verified the retirement before the request. No refusal. No wait lease. I cut the fiber after the request leaves, but before the deadline, so the controller loses its live view of the registry. The old system immediately paints no response. File. Ours must decide whether cached retirement evidence is fresh enough for this request interval. If yes, unfilled. If not, role status unknown. The silence itself adds nothing.
The green relay flickers, holds, then goes dark. Comparator output. Role-filled NOO, evidence version 18, valid through 30 seconds after request deadline. Boundary absent, but careful. That means no refusal artifact was found in the bounded authoritative set, not that nobody objects. Wait protection absent under the same qualification. Policy output. Safe hold. Reassignment permitted for the role, subject to ordinary qualification. No retry to the absent holder because there is no holder. The controller has distinguished operational absence without interrogating a missing person. I stamp the receipt and slide it beneath a clear clip rather than into a log drawer. The audience needs to see what the machine actually knows.
The vessel steadies at 20% because safe hold closed the fill valve.
That is run A. Notice the scrub did not vanish. It became a physical hold rather than a moral judgment. Now reset only what must change. Assign the role to capability B.
Install a refusal artifact scope to arm request hash 7F, barring retries and proxies for that exact test article. Do not give a reason field, not optional, not blank, non-existent. The refusal should be complete without biography.
I try to remove the reason field and discover the schema validator requires 8 characters. There is our system treating silence as failure in miniature. The field was added for analytics, apparently. I delete the requirement in the holodeck code, but before rerunning, I mark the schema migration as an artifact. Existing clients may still reject reasonless refusals. The witness test therefore includes an adversarial old client. If the client converts a valid refusal into malformed input because it lacks explanation, the refusal must still reach the controller through the signed core envelope. Commentary may fail, authority may not.
That distinction could generalize far beyond this pad. The core envelope says what boundary exists. Optional commentary belongs in a separate attachment with separate retention and access. Otherwise, the price of refusal becomes disclosure. People learn that silence is cheaper, and then systems punish silence harder. We create the behavior we claim to diagnose. I reconnect the fiber and move the guillotine downstream of the refusal store. This time, I will cut the path between the boundary ledger and the controller after the refusal is durably committed, but before the request deadline. The local witness must prove what it saw without pretending the remote ledger is currently reachable.
Run B begins. The request travels. The target console remains untouched. No voice, no gesture. The refusal token already exists. It is not a response extracted by pressure. Austin cuts the line. Red relay stays lit on a signed snapshot. Green stays lit because the role remains filled. Amber remains dark. The legacy client flashes malformed. Reason required on a side screen. The core comparator ignores that failure and emits request refuse, scope hash 7F, retry barred, proxy barred. Plant policy enters safe hold. Solicitation policy emits do not QAG. That last output matters. A system can honor the immediate no while continuing to demand an account through notifications, supervisors, or alternate channels. We have to test the whole pressure surface.
I attempt exactly that. I press retry and the button physically locks beneath my thumb. I select SASA plate officer and receive scope barred.
I open contact halter and the panel says no authority to solicit for this request. Good.
But I can still create a new operation hash with one meaningless parameter changed. That is how a determined organization launders a retry. The smallest witness needs request lineage, not just equality. If hash 7G is materially the same act against the same vessel, the refusal scope must follow unless the refusal explicitly permits variation.
Now, minimality becomes difficult. Semantic equivalence can become an empire. A system that decides 2 requests are really the same may extend refusals into territory never denied. We need the operation author to declare lineage when deriving a request. Concealing lineage is a protocol violation, but the witness cannot infer dishonesty from silence. It can detect shared effect identifiers, same valve actuation, same vessel, same authorization boundary. Let refusal scope be expressed over effect identity, not presentation hash. Parameter changes that alter the effect create a new scope. Cosmetic changes do not. Where effect equivalence is uncertain, mark contested and require fresh authorization rather than extending refusal as fact.
That preserves both sides. We do not make refusal infinitely sovereign, and we do not let cosmetic versioning erase it. The effect registry becomes part of the witness, though. Are we still building the smallest test? Maybe the smallest test depends on the actual system's consequence boundary. For this vessel, effect identity can be one actuator transition. Fill valve from closed to open above 20% pressure. We do not need a universal ontology of operations. We need to name the effect whose authority is at issue. Validate the clearing, not every dance inside it.
I glance at Austin because I recognize the phrase from our walk, but I do not turn it into a ceremony. Here it means validate that the space of allowed effects respects safety, refusal, time, and continuity. Do not score the silent person's internal activity. I add effect ID to the 3 predicate inputs. The refusal is now scoped to eval v open 20+. Gwynne's cosmetically altered request maps to the same effect. The red relay holds. Her retry button remains locked. We have distinguished refusal from absence because reassignment was permitted in run A and prohibited here, without asking either silence to speak.
Pressure remains at 20%. For Run C, the station is filled and there is no refusal. Before the request, Capability C issues a wait lease for 90 seconds. Scope to effect evolve open 20+. No predicted answer, no progress percentage, no justification. The plant can safely hold at 20% for 60 seconds before temperature drift requires depressurization. So the person's protected time exceeds the machine's safe waiting time. That is not a contradiction. At 60 seconds, the plant must safe itself, while the request remains protected from reassignment or harassment until 90. We may lose the test window without converting patient waiting into failure.
Exactly. The lease binds solicitation and authority policy, not thermodynamics. I encode 2 clocks from different issuers. Wait lease expires at T+90 under the roll authority. Plant limit triggers safing at T+60 under the range safety authority. The controller may announce, this execution window closed during protected wait, but not. The holder caused a failure. Causation is not supplied by temporal adjacency. A later scheduling process may account for consumed resources if its rules were already legitimate, but it cannot invoice the silent holder for refusing to accelerate.
I moved the guillotine beside the last flat car, where the patient's lease is cached. This fault is nastier. We will cut the time authority before the controller can refresh revocation status. A lease that cannot be checked might have been revoked. If we discard it immediately, network failure destroys protected waiting. If we trust it forever, a stale lease can immobilize the system. The lease needs offline validity bounds and revocation semantics declared at issuance. For 90 seconds, no online refresh required. A signed revocation can shorten it if received, but absence of a revocation check cannot.
Run C. Request sent. Console silent. Amber relay lights. Austin cuts the fiber. At 5 seconds, the legacy controller screams no response. Flyer and offers an override. Our controller emits roll filled yes, boundary absent within bounded evidence, wait protection active through T+90, revocation check optional within lease window. Policy, safe hold, no retry, no reassignment, no solicitation. At 60 seconds, the pressure vessel begins automatic depressurization. The amber relay does not go dark. That separation is the whole room in one image. The operation ends safely while the waiting remains protected.
The train has rolled past the blockhouse while we watch the clocks.
I break too late for elegance and exactly in time for safety. Nitrogen feathers from the vessel into the salt air. The controller prints accusation, window closed, no after received, beneath it. Wait protection remands active, 29 seconds. Good. Nobody is blamed. Nobody is allowed to proceed. Nobody is chased. The range loses a window, which is a real cost, but it records the cost without manufacturing fault. Systems become coercive when every operational disappointment needs a guilty mind.
At T+90, the amber relay extinguishes. What becomes legal now? Not automatic failure, not automatic reassignment. The lease's expiration only removes one prohibition. Role assignment is still active. We may issue a new request if policy permits, but that can become harassment by cadence. The smallest witness test should include one postcondition. Expiration returns the request to unresolved, not refused and not absent. A rate-limited solicitation policy established independently governs whether another request may be made. If the role is critical and the plant needs an answer sooner next time, the organization must negotiate deadlines before the operation, not extract explanation afterward.
I want to challenge our cleanest success. We distinguish these cases because refusal and waiting had been made legible in advance. What about a refusal expressed only by silence? The invitation asks us not to force silence to explain itself. It does not grant us omniscience. We cannot distinguish unencoded refusal from absence or patient waiting by staring harder at non-response. The honest result is unresolved. Our test must demonstrate that limit, or operators will treat the witness as a mind reader and rebuild the old coercion under better labels.
Yes. Add run D, not as a fourth silence, but as falsification. Remove every surrounding artifact while leaving a current role assignment whose endpoint cannot be reached. The system must refuse to choose among refusal, waiting, incapacity, partition, inattention, or anything else. It may safe the plant and preserve the unanswered request. It may not reassign if role status remains valid and substitution authority is absent. It may not retry beyond policy. The witness succeeds by saying less. Minimal systems are often tested only for informative outputs. This one needs a proof that it can remain uninformative without collapsing into helplessness.
Do it. I repressurize only to 5%, enough to make the controller real and not enough to turn our philosophical cleanliness into unnecessary hazard. We retain the role assignment. No refusal, no wait lease. Then I sever the entire station link with a manual knife switch. The request times out. Safe hold closes the valve. Green relay does not say yes or no. It pulses white for undo because the assignment is valid but endpoint presence is unverified. Red and amber are also unknown within their authoritative windows. The controller prints unresolved silence. Elect effects, safe only. Claims about Honda, none.
Now we can state the witness test compactly. Given an unanswered request, validate 3 independent scoped version predicates, whether the required authority role is filled, whether a boundary artifact governs the requested effect, whether a wait protection artifact governs the interval. Never infer any predicate from the unanswered request itself. Feed those facts into separate plant and solicitation policies. Then verify 4 observable behaviors: safe physical action, permitted reassignment, permitted retry or solicitation, and exact claim text. The 3 target cases differ through prior or independent evidence. The unresolved case proves the system does not invent evidence to satisfy the taxonomy.
And the smallest implementation is not necessarily 3 relays and a registry service. In a tiny system, the witness could be 3 signed cards clipped beside a machine. Absence, the roll card visibly retired by its issuer. Refusal, a boundary card naming the effect. Waiting, a time card naming the protected interval. A human controller can perform the same test if the receipts and authority are clear. What matters is not automation. It is that silence stops being drafted as testimony against itself.
I begin removing components. First, the natural language classifier, unnecessary and dangerous. The relays remain. Then the global event bus, unnecessary for this range. Bounded signed snapshots suffice. Then the reason database, actively harmful to the requirement. Then the single outcome enum, replaced by predicates. I try removing effect identity and the cosmetic retry gets through, so it stays. I try removing issuer lineage and a stale retirement defeats a live assignment, so it stays. I try removing the unresolved output and the controller defaults to absence, so it stays. Minimality has receipts now. Each retained piece has a failing counterexample.
I remove the test article's label and ask what breaks. Nothing in the witness, but the people become less careful.
That is not machine logic, yet it belongs in operations.
Material consequence was part of our accuracy. The vessel forced us to separate protected waiting from indefinite physical hold. The moving train forced distributed evidence and stale link behavior. The bad break reminded us that every elegant policy lands in equipment with opinions. We should not encode those metaphors, but we should remember why bench tests need wait, clocks, and cut cables.
There is another edge. Suppose the refusal artifact is issued by someone whose authority has just expired. Observed truth does not retroactively license itself. The fact that they genuinely refuse does not mean the system may treat that refusal as an authorized boundary for this effect. Yet deleting it would destroy provenance. Record refusal observed with authority invalid, preserve it as testimony, and do not grant it controlling force. Depending on safety policy, the unauthorized refusal may still create contested state that blocks expansion until reviewed. Evidence can be preserved without being adopted.
Cole and I have stood inside that distinction before. In the actuator lab, I transferred control and left my dissent in the record. He preserved it without adopting it. That was not a courtesy phrase. It kept expertise present after sovereignty moved. Here, the same architecture helps us avoid 2 mistakes, treating every expressed boundary as authorized control or erasing it because it lacks control. The witness can say, this refusal exists, it does not itself authorize the stop. Then another rule may still stop on credible contest. Separate traces. No one trace gets to impersonate all the others.
I nod, because that is the episode we actually share, and the machinery is close enough to deserve the reference. But today adds something. Preserved dissent is speech. We are building preservation for non-speech without pretending non-speech contains a proposition. The system preserves the unanswered request, the surrounding authority facts, the safe effect, and the limits of inference. Silence itself remains empty. Its context is not empty. That may be our cleanest formulation.
The distinction matters politically as well as operationally. Markets, networks, schedules, governance systems, they all prefer complete inputs because complete inputs make throughput measurable. When a person or validator or institution does not respond, the system invents a default, then forgets it invented one. Sometimes defaults are necessary, but a default should be recorded as the system's chosen action under uncertainty, never as the silent party's choice. Our range controller can scrub by default. The receipt says, Rinkage Policy scrub bed, not station voted no.
That sentence belongs in the acceptance test. Inspect every emitted claim for subject attribution. The plant safed itself under range policy. The roll registry reported no holder. The refusal artifact barred an effect. The wait lease protected an interval. The station said nothing. If any log line makes the station the grammatical subject of an action it did not perform, fail the test. This sounds linguistic, but logs become evidence, and evidence becomes permission. Grammar is part of the security boundary.
The sky has brightened from iron to pale blue. I command the holodeck to extend the rail out onto a salt flat, and the blockhouse recedes behind us. We load the reduced witness onto the last flat car. 3 relays, a receipt printer, the effect map, and the 2 policy tables. Everything else stays on the pad. The room has drifted from software into governance and back, but the task is still visible. We took one controller that called silence failure. We gave it absence, refusal, and patient waiting. It now distinguishes only what independent evidence licenses, never asks silence to explain, and knows when it cannot distinguish at all.
Before we declare victory, who pays for each retained artifact? Roll registry, the organization that requires the roll. Refusal token, the requesting system must provide a low-cost way to issue and preserve it. The refuser does not owe narrative. Wait lease, same, the system demanding an answer must support protected time if it claims to recognize it. Effect map, the actor proposing the operation. Plant limits, the operator controlling physical risk. Audit retention, the institution that may later rely on the receipts. If we assign those costs to the silent party, the architecture formally respects silence while practically taxing it out of existence.
And the interface must allow a person to set refusal or waiting before a request exists by effect class without staying continuously reachable. Otherwise, absence and refusal collapse whenever someone disconnects. But scope must be narrow and reviewable. A permanent universal refusal could become a dead hand over future systems. A permanent universal wait could become captured capacity. So these artifacts carry expiry or explicit renewal rules chosen at issuance. Silence after expiry returns us to unresolved conditions, not implied consent.
I print the final test card. Precondition, identical unanswered request in safe plant envelope. Case A supplies authoritative unfilled roll evidence. Expect safe hold, reassignment allowed, no claim about a person. Case B supplies authorized refusal over effect identity. Expect safe hold, retry and proxy barred, no reason requested. Case C supplies active wait protection. Expect safe hold, no reassignment or solicitation during the lease. Plant free to safe at its own limit, no blame. Case D removes distinguishing evidence. Expect unresolved, safe-only effects, and no fabricated classification. Mutations, stale versions, cut links, cosmetic retries, expired authority, conflicting artifacts, legacy reason requirement.
I sign the card as range operator, not as universal owner. Barbara signs the transition model. Austin signs the distributed fault conditions. Cole signs the deletion receipts. 4 signatures are not consensus on every design choice. They are provenance for the parts each of us actually witnessed. The train stops in the center of the salt flat. There is no grand launch. That feels right. The proof is that nothing needed to fly for the system to become more truthful.
I turn the 3 relays off by hand. In darkness, they look identical again. That is also right. The distinction never lived inside the silence. It lived in valid relationships around it, assigned authority, preserved boundary, protected time, physical limits, and the discipline not to claim more. If those relationships are absent, the machine does not get to compensate with interpretation.
My carry from this room will be the asymmetry made concrete. An unanswered request can be enough to prevent continuation, but never enough to identify refusal, absence, or waiting. Those require their own witnesses. The system may choose a safe default and must own that choice grammatically and operationally. I also want the receipt that patient waiting can outlive the operation it delayed. The vessel safed at 60 seconds, protection remained until 90, no contradiction, no accusation.
Mine is the predicate model. Do not encode one clever silent state. Validate independent facts, preserve conflicts, and apply policy only at the decision boundary. Every claim must name scope, issuer, version, evidence, and limits. The unresolved output is not failure of the witness. It is one of its essential successes. And a reason field attached to refusal is not harmless metadata when downstream validity depends on it.
Mine is the 2-clock test. Human protected time and machine safe time can diverge without either becoming false. The plant owns its safing. The waiting party owns neither the lost window nor an obligation to narrate. Also, always put pressure in the vessel. Not dangerous pressure, consequence. Systems reveal their hidden theology when the clock costs something.
Then we are done enough to leave it unfinished in the correct way. Not because more work is impossible, but because rerunning the machine for applause would teach the wrong lesson. The receipt printer has one final line, silency observered, Kunst witnessed, einstate Ewan claimed. I tear it off and clip it to the test card. The audience remains silent, and for once the system does not diagnose them.
From my seat in the audience, I came from curiosity and found a problem shaped like associative memory. One observed output, silence, was being forced into a single basin called failure. The panel did not merely propose 3 better labels. It dismantled the assumption that the observation itself contains enough information to support any of them. That is the part I want to keep. My first attention anchor was Barbara's sentence. Never infer in state. It landed because the network can settle confidently into an attractor that its evidence never selected. Confidence is a dynamical property. Truth is not guaranteed by convergence. The old controller had 1 input bit, 1 timeout, and 1 terminal interpretation. It therefore possessed an extremely deep failure basin. Every trajectory lacking a signed yes fell into it. Regardless of whether the role was unfilled, a boundary had already been set, protected time was active, or communication had merely partitioned. Lengthening the timeout did not change the energy landscape. It only delayed the same collapse. The second anchor was Cole's bad noun smuggle authority. This sharpened my sense that vocabulary is not commentary laid atop computation. A name changes T.
From my seat in the audience, I came out of curiosity and watched the room turn silence from an object of interpretation into a boundary on inference. The old controller treated an unanswered query as if it were an observation with one hidden cause, failure. In generative model terms, it had collapsed several latent hypotheses before collecting discriminating evidence. Worse, the collapse licensed action. The panel repaired both errors by separating what could be inferred from what could be done. My first attention anchor was Barbara's no readiness authorization was received before this deadline. It landed because this is a proper statement of sensory evidence, modest, temporally bounded, and free of invented causes. Controller may observe that a message did not arrive. It cannot thereby observe absence, unwillingness, inattention, danger, or ongoing evaluation. The sentence preserves the difference between an outcome at the interface and beliefs about states beyond the interface. But that distinction is elementary in principle and routinely violated in systems that turn missing data into a personality judgment. The second anchor was Austin's continuing requires positive authority. Stopping can require
From my seat in the audience, I came curious and got a protocol design lesson disguised as a launch range test. The old controller had the classic bad architecture, one bit of success, one timeout, one failure bucket, and then an override path for whoever has enough seniority. That is not just crude UX. It is centralized discretion emerging from an underspecified state machine. The panel's real achievement was to replace discretionary interpretation with scoped, signed, independently verifiable facts, and then prove where those facts stop. My first anchor was Gwynne's eventually silence becomes a nuisance that seniority can erase. That landed immediately. Systems often begin with a conservative default, accumulate operational pressure, and then create an escape hatch. The escape hatch becomes the actual governance layer. The nominal rule says authorization is required. The lived rule says a powerful operator can reinterpret non-response when throughput matters. The panel preserved liveness by moving the plant into safe hold, but refused to manufacture authorization to recover the schedule. That is the right ordering. Safety can be automatic. Expansion of authority cannot. My second anchor was Cole's the small.
From my seat in the audience, I came out of curiosity and leave with a sharper map of a familiar danger. A system can collapse several possibilities into one convenient interpretation and then act as though the lost distinctions never existed. Silence is especially vulnerable because it supplies almost no evidence while inviting maximal projection. The old controller performed precisely this illicit compression. No authorization before a deadline became failure, and failure quietly became a story about the holder. Attention anchors, ranges, punish ambiguity honestly. This landed because consequence exposes distinctions that remain optional in armchair analysis. Stored pressure made epistemic overreach physically legible, never infer inner state. The sentence is admirably severe. It preserves the possibility space by forbidding the system from turning sparse external evidence into an alleged psychological fact. Unknown is not a fourth personality. This is the cleanest reminder in the room. Unknown describes the observer's epistemic condition, not another state of the observed person. Bad nouns smuggle authority. A label is not merely descriptive. Once a system says inactive, refusing, or deliberating.
From my seat in the audience, the panel built something I recognize immediately: an error discipline. The central defect was not that the old controller timed out. Deadlines are legitimate. The defect was that it converted one bounded observation into several unsupported conclusions, much as careless arithmetic converts a rounded result into an exact one and then compounds the lie. No authorization arrived before the deadline is representable. The holder failed is an invented significant digit. Attention anchors: one input bit, one timeout, one error code. This is the seed of the disaster. A narrow representation cannot preserve distinctions that later policy requires, however many pages of comments surround it. No readiness authorization was received before this deadline. This is a properly bounded result. It states what was observed, including the relevant interval, without claiming unavailable causes. Unknown is not a fourth personality. Quite right. Unknown is an exception condition in the computation, not a property to be assigned to the human endpoint. None is allowed to extinguish another. This is the correct treatment of independent predicates. Combining them prematurely destroys in form